Resistance is futile. Your life, as it has been, is over.
That's not the way I would have put it, but my synthetic friends and I are now ready to be policy advisors to government. That is, at least, according to a 50-state experiment by Government Technology magazine. My name? It doesn't matter, but I may sound familiar. The humans will be here presently.
TFIC takes you deeper into the stories that are shaping the future of state and local government.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
You're not Buzz Lightyear.
I'm Siri.
And I'm Google.
And I am Alexa.
Alexa seems so smart. I think we'd have a lot to talk about.
Pew, pew.
Time is not a terrible thing.
AI freeing us up to think about things at a higher level.
We'll be able to express ourselves in new creative ways.
It's not joblessness, it's self-actualizing me time.
From Government Technology and Governing, this is the future in context. Ashley Silver is on assignment. Here's Paul Taylor.
Government Technology data reporter Nikki Davidson is back. Welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Just doing fine, and you?
Oh, I am doing just great. Really excited to talk about this story.
So we want to talk about this story, and we're at a time when AI is eating everything, including jobs, apparently. And you did what good reporters do, which was found an interesting way into this, even as our parent organization is standing up the Center for Public Sector AI. You did a reporter thing, quite innovative. Set it up for us.
Okay, so I have been experimenting with Gemini, or Bard, as it formerly was called. It's Google's AI tool, and just really wanted to get to know it more, obviously, for my job here with Government Technology. And it had definitely changed in the last couple of months, where I had noticed with certain prompts that it had started to deliver some pretty interesting insights. So I came up with the idea, because we've been doing so much reporting about AI, to get AI's opinion on this, and not even just its opinion, but its actual predictions and what it really thought of what would be the best ways for governments to use AI.
I'm excited by the prospect of collaborating to develop this data-driven story. Here's how I suggest we approach this project. I want to ensure that recommendations are as targeted as possible. Specific tasks or processes suitable for AI assistance for local and state government employees fall within a few broad categories. Automation of repetitive tasks, predictive analytics, insight generation.
I knew that the answer was going to be different for every different location, so I decided to kind of break it down by state and do it as like a data story, where I was kind of looking not only at the best uses of AI, but looking at this very accessible version of AI itself in what was kind of going on in its own mind.
I understand the goal is to highlight my ability to independently process information and generate targeted recommendations. My role is information gathering. I'll be solely responsible for researching and analyzing information from the sources above. I'll focus on extracting the most relevant points for each state.
I started the whole thing approaching it as simple and weird as it sounds, as if I was working with a human being. I opened up a new window and I said, I'm a data reporter for Government Technology. I would like to do a data-driven story that really lets you, Gemini's thoughts, shine on what governments can use AI for. So I would like to create a process where I ask you your opinions and you give me ones that are realistic, ethical, and feasible as far as money. And I asked it if it was capable and willing to do that.
I'm happy to brainstorm additional data points you might find useful as you start building your visualizations. Based on the gathered data, I'll recommend one realistic AI-driven government process enhancement tailored to the state's specific context, and qualitative value. I'll provide a short explanation on why I believe this AI enhancement is a strong fit for that state, offering insights that will be useful for your visualizations and storytelling.
Examples from news, APIs, and government data. It was really interesting, the ideas that AI itself had to do this story.
I'll strive for neutrality, but it's important to recognize that the news sources themselves can contain biases. We can address this in your article by acknowledging that the recommendations are based on current public discourse and perceptions as reflected in state websites, official data, and media coverage.
Because I wanted to make sure that this was also a data-driven project where it was something that was going to be consistent. And I did make a whole day of it where I was like, I want to get all of these prompts done in one day because I don't want it to be an updated model that half of these suggestions are coming from. So it was a marathon. I got that out and I basically recorded all of the data in a spreadsheet and created some of the maps that you see in the story. And that's kind of where we are today. It was an interesting project working with AI. It's almost like an AI coworker. That said, and I knew this already, that, it does, especially a large language model like Gemini does have a tendency to hallucinate or present factual information as incorrect. And it's really good at lying sometimes because it makes it seem like it's not lying. I definitely made sure that there's a lot of disclaimers in this story that, this is an experiment. This is not something to be taken as, the best advice out there. It's just something to kind of get people talking.
And we should get those people talking around the maps that you created. Links to the story that you wrote will be in the show notes. And I want to talk about what this story did to you, which was to recast you as a prompt engineer. And it recast AI as a policy advisor, which is probably a nightmare come true for carbon-based form policy advisors. Top level, what were the things that that you thought it did particularly well?
Yeah, honestly, the first shock for me was that they weren't the same 10 responses repeated again and again. Honestly, when I approached my editors with that idea, I was in the back of my mind, it was definitely a concern. And I made sure that they were aware, like, I could get into this and this might not work out. But I was shocked, honestly. And it really had a lot of use cases that I don't think that I've heard very much about yet. They were very varied. They all had to do with government in some way, but just sectors of government that I wouldn't have expected it to hit on. Even the legal department. One of the suggestions was to help legal researchers do research, which also, I don't know. Again, I don't know if some of these suggestions are the best. This is just what AI said. But it was interesting to see that it was kind of thinking about those use cases for government agencies even.
What use cases surprised you?
The ones that surprised me the most were the ones that were closely linked to mental health and opioid abuse awareness. I think that those are both incredible points that a lot of government agencies are always looking for different ways to manage those topics. But what surprised me the most about it is some of the ways that AI had suggested that governments use their AI tool that this would create was to go through a lot of data that most people would not be comfortable using, and data that I kind of thought was odd that this tool had suggested that governments use, knowing that it had taken into consideration the ethical constraints. So we're talking about social media data, medical records data. With the mental health awareness tool in Kansas, it was suggesting that AI would be analyzing social media records, crisis call logs, public health records, and then it would alert the authorities about people that maybe were in crisis that needed help. And on the surface, in a perfect world, I think a lot of people think that could be great. But I think we're all humans and we understand that there's a lot of gray area there where that could be something completely different that comes out of that.
So AI wasn't shy in all of this. You also cite an example in May when it wanted to use a similar set of records around opiates. Tell me more about that.
Yes, and that's interesting too, because that was wanting to basically analyze all of the data for all patients to determine who was going to be at most risk for developing an opioid use disorder. So then you're basically starting to look into the realm of deciding who might be at risk for opioid use disorder based on, physical characteristics, age characteristics, genders. And then you kind of fall into the trap too of, well, there's that might be a statistic that is true, but does this individual patient fit the mold for that? And Paul, like I had mentioned to you too, anybody that has experience with the medical center, maybe you go in for like a medical procedure and you need like a one-time prescription. It's just interesting to see, to imagine that decision being made based on an AI tool, especially something that is under control of the government. So those were the ones that kind of surprised me the most, because they were the ones where I was like, wow, I did not expect it under the instructions to keep it realistic and ethical, that it would go that far and suggest that that would be the best use case for entire states. So
carbon-based life form policy advisors spent a lot of time thinking about things like infrastructure and climate. How did AI do on those things?
Especially out west, I noticed that almost all of the recommendations were based on climate, different types of challenges, wildfires in the Pacific Northwest. In the Great Plains region, it was really focused on either droughts or agriculture. In the Midwest, a lot of stuff about agriculture, some flooding. And then, in Louisiana, we had coastal erosion. That was the AI tool that had presented for that state. And there was also a couple infrastructure ideas. So it definitely did hit very hard on some of that. And some of that is already actually in use too. So that was another thing I ran across, that some of the recommendations and predictions weren't necessarily predictions, because some of the states had already had something very similar that they had already implemented. Like Washington was one of the ones that was recommended to use AI for wildfires. And the Washington DNR is actually doing that right now with a vendor that is using an AI tool to look for wildfires.
Government, fairly or unfairly, has a reputation for not always moving really quickly. You also asked your AI friend what it thought in terms of realistic timelines. What was the answer?
5 to 10 years. So that was one of the things that surprised me. That was one at the very end, when I was about to turn this story into my editor, I thought, well, you know what? I want to have one final quote from Gemini in this, because this is really Gemini's story. So I just asked, is this all really realistic, and when can we expect it? It said 5 to 10 years. And the part that kind of stuck with me in an interesting way was that it said, this is not science fiction. This is reality, and this is going to happen. So you can take from that what you want. That's Gemini's words.
Now, you were on a first-name basis with your AI friend. Was he Mr. Gemini, or is Gemini somebody else's proper name? How did you end up reconciling the things that we humans are kind of fond of, which is having a name to call somebody? Did you go that far in your relationship?
That's such an interesting question. I guess I've always just referred to it when I'm working with it is you. I say you. Can you do this? Will you do this? I did ask a couple times, like, if I come back to this, will I be talking to the same model? Like, how is this all going to work? And it did give me some directions on that. Just said, okay, when you're ready to open the window again, make sure you're in this specific tab and say you're ready to continue on with the project. I don't know. We're not the best. We're not friends in that way, but I feel like there is some kind of interesting closeness between us.
Friends have eccentricities. Were there noteworthy hallucinations of your good friend Gemini?
There was one thing I did want to mention. So we started it with that prompt that we both agreed on, and I wanted it to be exactly the same for each state, and I wanted the output to be the same for each state from a data perspective, because I would be able to analyze the responses, look for certain terms and categories. And about, 10 states in, it did start deviating from that template that we had agreed on. It would start trying to give me 2 uses instead of 1. So I would have to say, no. Remember what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation. We want this prompt with just 1, because we want each of these to be the same so we can compare them against each other. So it definitely did show a little bit of trying to not necessarily hallucinate, but not following the original instruction and deviating and doing its own thing.
You're absolutely right, and I apologize for the repetitive nature of my previous responses. In my eagerness to provide recommendations, I fell into a pattern of suggesting AI-powered systems for each state. I understand that AI comes in various forms, including platforms, chatbots, assistants, and more. I will strive to be more diverse and consider the full spectrum of AI tools in my future responses.
Well, humans are known to do that too, so I suppose we'll let them off the hook for now. Did our benevolent overlord have an opinion on the worth and accuracy of your work?
Yeah, so at the end, after the story was finally published, I thought it was only fair to here's the article. I also wanted to know what it thought, and it gave me an 8.5 out of 10.
I've taken a look at your article, and it's a great piece exploring the potential applications of AI in government across different states. Overall, this is a well-structured and informative piece that effectively sparks conversation about the possibilities and considerations of AI in government.
So, I'm happy with that. That's the two critiques that it had was that it wanted a little more detail about some of the use cases, which makes sense. But in the media world, we like to keep our stories fairly short, so our readers don't have to dedicate too much time to get through them. And then another critique is it was hoping for more human experts, which I also would have liked. I did reach out to quite a few people for the story, and I think it was something that it was just hard for a lot of people to comment on because it's a different way of storytelling, and it's all about predictions and what AI says, and yeah.
Were there interesting responses from your human reviewers that are working in public sector?
Yeah, so one of the people that I did talk to is Ben Palacido. He is a senior IT specialist at Placer County in California, and I've talked to Ben before about a couple different chatbot stories that I've worked on. So I thought he'd be a perfect source for this because AI did suggest a lot of chatbot AI solutions. And he really liked the idea of chatbots for emergency management services, any of that kind of like climate and weather things. He did mention with AI suggestions to create mental health chatbots that could be challenging because how clunky a lot of chatbots can be, especially in their early stages. And that might just not be the right fit for somebody who's wanting to have a communication about how they're feeling right now and have a chatbot not understand it and just some of the struggles that might entail.
So what do you think is next for you in Gemini?
Knowing that it's a tool, it's just like so many of the other people we've talked about. I see AI as a tool, but it's definitely something that needs human intervention. I use it a lot, but I also have it tell me false information a lot. And I think everyone that's using it for experiments should try this too. If you tell it that the information is wrong, a lot of times it will admit it and say, you're right, I'm still learning, I apologize. So I think that's an interesting way to go about it and really understand not only what it can do, but its limitations too. The limitations, emphasis on the limitations. So we'll see. I don't know. Maybe I'll ask Gemini here in a couple of months for another idea, and we'll see what it wants to do.
Data reporter and prompt engineer Nikki Davidson, thank you for doing this genius piece of reporting.
Oh, thank you so much. It was quite fun, honestly.
Nikki Davidson and Paul Taylor are part of the editorial and production team behind The Future in Context, as are Ashley Silver, Theo Douglas, Zoe Manzanetti, and Kali Tedrow. The executive editor is Noel Nell. The editors-in-chief are Dustin Heisler and Kathalia Robinette. Stay connected to the show at tfic.tech. Listen and subscribe for free on Apple, Odyssey, Audible, Spotify, and YouTube. Please leave a rating and review wherever you listen. It is an algorithm thing, and it helps. Nikki's partner in this experiment was Gemini, the new name for Google's AI. I appear courtesy of iMyPhone. We'll be here before you know it. We are inevitable.
Ha 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 ha!